I'm Sarah Small. I'm an assistant professor of economics at the University of Utah. Before I was here at the University of Utah, I had a few other positions. I got my PhD in economics at Colorado State University in 2022. Also in 2022, I was a postdoc at the Center for Women in Work at Rutgers University. Before that, I was a visiting research fellow at the Center for the History of Political Economy at Duke University. And I also briefly worked as a policy research associate at Root Policy Research in Denver. Great. So my research focus is broadly in feminist economics. A lot of my work specifically focuses on intra-household bargaining, right? So decisions that are made within households. I also focus on issues of paid and unpaid care work. I also focus on occupational crowding and labor markets. I have a whole other kind of research trajectory also in the history of feminist economic thought. And I've also written quite a bit on feminist teaching pedagogy and how we can make classrooms in economics a lot more inclusive. And I've done research on feminist methodology within economics. Yeah, I really wanted to become an economist because I had a deep interest in social justice. It seemed to me like, for better or worse, economists were kind of always in the mix in any type of conversation about social issues. So you'd see economists in US government, on the news, and policy spaces. So for me, it seemed like a really useful and utilitarian kind of avenue to both study social justice and also promote my interests in equity. And I didn't have, I think, a clear picture of what economics was before I was really deeply involved in it. I had taken my first economics class in high school, and I was really actually quite shocked to see how much economics has focused on issues outside of like money and finance and things I think a lot of people think about when they think about economics and the economy. I was pleasantly surprised. It's a lot more focused on not just markets, right, but also families and their decisions, individuals and community well-being, right, in society. So then in college, I kind of continued in economics courses, but I didn't quite know like how to make use of that. I didn't quite know what one should do with an economics degree if you're interested in social justice and interested in doing research. Until one of my undergraduate professors just suggested I get a PhD in economics. And I had no idea what a PhD was at the time, right? Nobody in my family has a PhD. Nobody I knew growing up had one. So I'm really thankful, right, for his mentorship and encouragement. And I decided to pursue it as a result. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of challenges, right, as like a white woman born in the United States, I think a lot of doors have been open to me that haven't been open to a lot of other folks in the discipline. Right. Unfortunately, I think the economics discipline is still kind of rife with a lot of misogyny. I experienced a decent amount of it in my educational pursuits and in my career. And I think, right, this is reflected on several levels. I think one, just simply like being a woman in economics is a bit challenging, right? It's dominated by men, and that hasn't really improved over the last several decades. But also, right, being a woman studying issues of gender and feminist economics, right? I think there's this kind of, sexist trope about women just studying women's issues and feminist economics. And a lot of people actually, a lot of more senior economists really advised me against going into feminist economics, right? They said kind of making your way in the discipline as a feminist economist and as a woman is going to be particularly challenging. And right, I think this is a larger reflection of economics kind of not being willing to embed feminist thought in the same way that other disciplines have been able to do so. Right, several economists have told me that the things I study are not economics, right? Several have said that issues of, bargaining that goes on between a couple or within a household is not economics, right? Even though we talk about kind of bargaining in larger market structures quite often. A lot of, folks have told me, well, why should an economist care about unpaid work, right? So feminist economists, right, in my work and in feminist economics more broadly, right, I think we've been trying to kind of challenge the discipline to think about these things as topics that economists do, have business kind of studying. So, right, this kind of the challenges I've faced in the discipline, I don't think are especially new. I think it's a reflection of, I think, what feminist economists in the field have been experiencing for several decades. Yeah. So, for me, a lot of my personal experience has shaped my work, and I think that's a good thing. And I think that's exactly why, right, feminist economists are arguing for more diversity in the field of economics. So, for example, right, I kind of got into this question of feminist economics largely inspired by what I observed in my own household growing up. Right. I mean, my mother and father made about the same amount of money when I was born, but for some reason, right, she decided to be the one to withdraw from the labor force for several years and work to raise me for a few years. And so this got me really, I think, curious about how these type of economic decisions are made within households and how they're shaped not only by right, money in markets, but also by gender expression and by patriarchy. And then later, right, to give you another example, in my PhD, I was dating somebody who happened to start a business, which was really exciting. But suddenly I found that all the housework became my responsibility, right, when previously it was shared a little more equally. And so I was curious, right, if this was an experience that other people were facing. So a lot of my doctoral research was exactly on kind of entrepreneurship and housework and how those two interact. And what I find in my research is that when white men start businesses, they get kind of this extra privilege of being able to kick back in terms of unpaid housework in the home. But when Black men, when white women, when Black women start businesses, they don't get the same privilege. And I think, right, this work, again, is highlighting why it's so important to have a diversity of voices in the discipline. I think for so long, this type of dynamic that I'm describing is one that economists have been missing when they talk about kind of entrepreneurial success rates that vary by race and gender, right? They haven't really thought about what's going on in the household that might be affecting success rates of firms. So a lot of, right, the intra-household work I do has been driven by personal experience. And again, I think, right, the fact that, women and feminist economists kind of broadly have encouraged the discipline to start thinking about things that have been previously just relegated as women's work, right, is just one of many examples about why the discipline needs to take the project of diversity a lot more seriously, right? We can ask a lot more exciting, novel questions in our work. Yeah, so I think, unfortunately, like kind of the labor market broadly, there's still a lot of discrimination prevalent in the economics discipline. There's also, right, a lot of, I think, class-based barriers to becoming a PhD level economist, right? Getting a PhD means spending several years in graduate school, oftentimes with, no funding or very little funding. So this means that a lot of the folks who are able to get economics PhDs are those who are coming from generational wealth, right? Which means that a lot of the questions that they're asking might miss questions that folks from right, more diverse class backgrounds might be able to ask in more, I think, unique and exciting ways. Right, and also, frankly, I think a lot of time, right, spent training as an economist, or at least a PhD level economist, can be inhibitive for a lot of individuals who have care responsibilities, right, which is oftentimes women. And frankly, a little inhibitive to folks who have an interest in raising children, right? It's really quite difficult, I think, to be in a PhD program and raise children. But I think, right, those are perhaps just barriers within graduate school more broadly. I think within the economics discipline in particular, there remain a lot of inequities in terms of right, promotion and women keeping their jobs in academic economics, right? We know that kind of the gender divide is a little bit less pronounced at the assistant professor level, so the folks who just come in to the university. But then as folks try to get tenure and move up the ranks, we see women kind of falling back, right? And this is the leaky pipeline problem that folks are often referring to. And, again, like a lot of the labor market, we see white women having a lot more success in navigating that than, Black women and Latina women in economics in particular. And I also think, right, some things that are kind of distinct to academic economics, there's been, several studies which have shown that women in economics get asked a lot more questions in their seminar presentations. A lot of times those questions are a lot more hostile, right? And so I think generally there's been, quite a bit of evidence that women are still facing, I think, a lot of hurdles within the discipline, kind of being both respected and being able to rise through the ranks. Right. I think there are already a lot of exciting opportunities that I hope will continue to grow, right, to help folks stay in the discipline. And I should mention, right, there are a lot of opportunities for funding in graduate programs. I know several graduate programs are working to establish better care infrastructure for their graduate students. And so I think this is a move in a really exciting direction, especially if we're interested in retaining women in the discipline. There's also, I think, a lot of really great and important mentoring opportunities within the discipline. So for instance, CSWEP, right, which is the Committee for the Status on Women in the Economics Profession, they have several kind of support networks and opportunities for women and LGBT folks to support one another. There's also, right, the National Economic Association, which is specifically committed to promoting economists of color. I'm really heavily involved in the International Association for Feminist Economics, which for me has been really, I think, career changing and life changing. It's been a really wonderful community of folks who I think really look out for each other, really support one another, right, in mentorship and job opportunities. They have a wonderful Young Scholars program in which folks are kind of paired up with a mentor. You can get your research kind of given feedback, right, do a lot of networking events. And they also, I think, something that this the International Association for Feminist Economics is trying to disrupt in the field is also the publication process. Their journal, Feminist Economics, has a specific policy for kind of mentoring folks from disadvantaged backgrounds who are trying to do research in feminist economics, right? So a lot of times you might send a paper to a journal, right, to try to get it published, and they'll just, kind of reject it. Feminist Economics as a journal, right, I think has really tried to say, well, this has potential. We're going to pair you up with, a more senior person in the discipline, and they're going to help you get this paper to where it needs to be for publication. And so I think there already are a lot of exciting opportunities in the discipline that I hope will help maintain and improve diversity in the field. But there's certainly room for growth. Yeah, I hope that the economics profession can just become a little bit more friendly broadly, right? I think the cutthroat culture of seminars, of peer review, right, these things I've mentioned, I think it's really uninviting for a lot of people, and right, kind of privileges those who already have right, an understanding of how these systems work, right? So privileging people who maybe have family members in academia, right, or these other kind of connections in the field. I also think that the discipline could be, right, a little more friendly to plurality of thought. Until, right, class, race, and gender-based work is valued in the discipline, right? Individuals who have a distinct perspective and research interests on these issues are going to continue to be excluded from kind of mainstream conversations. But this also means, right, I think being a little more interdisciplinary. I think economics has for a long time kind of drawn boundaries around, what is economics and what is not economics. I think that's not especially helpful in getting more novel questions answered. I also think there's, opportunities, again, in the vein of being more friendly, to really draw from other disciplines and incorporate scholars from other disciplines and their perspectives in our work. And right, I think the biggest thing, at least for me in my personal experience navigating the field, has been mentorship. So I think encouraging and developing mentorship is really invaluable. I think, right, the academic system, right, you get really heavily rewarded for research, right, for churning out really high impact publications. But the incentive structure within the academy is right, not one that would favor someone spending time on mentorship, which I think is really unfortunate, right, and something that I hope, right, our peer institutions, right, I hope our peers in the field really start to take the project of mentorship just as seriously as they take the project of their own research. I think a highlight for me working in economics has been really the mentorship I've experienced along every step of the way. I've been really kind of pampered with really personalized, wonderful, kind of sensitive mentorship. And I think without it, right, I wouldn't have become an economist in the first place. I wouldn't have known what a PhD was. And I also just certainly wouldn't have gone into feminist economics. I didn't even know that was a thing, right, until someone was kind enough to kind of, see that I was interested in those two things and led me down that path. And I also, right, like wouldn't have the job I have today if it weren't for mentorship. I've also, right, been especially happy to have found some community in the International Association for Feminist Economics. I mean, it's really a truly wonderful group of people. I look forward to the conferences every year. And it's so great, I think, to have a support system in any field, right, but especially one that's really so international, right, very mission focused. I think it's been really exciting for me to be heavily involved in that. And I also think, right, I love the freedom I have as an economist to study the things that are important to me. I think I have loved researching about women's experiences in the economy. Having this, freedom to pursue these interests is so great, and something that I think you don't find in a lot of other types of jobs. But again, right, if we're kind of going to encourage more folks to join economics, we need to continue to kind of improve, what folks are allowed to study and what folks are encouraged to study. So I hope, again, the field can kind of be more friendly to those who have, their own interests in economic issues of race and class and gender.